Hello everybody, it's Lazel here with another video. I think it's time for another artifact check, and before we jump into the artifact I just want to quickly remind everybody of you that I am doing the Pimp My Castle series, and there has been quite a few reach outs to me over the last few months, and I did a couple of videos of those, but so far nobody else has reached out to me. So if you're interested in me talking about your castle and giving some recommendations, or at least explaining my opinion about your castle, hit me up over my contact information in the channel information, and then we will get in contact and talk about everything from there on. Alright, so let's jump into today's artifact check. Today is about the Durendal Artifact. It's one of the purple artifacts, and it's mostly featured for the infantry and archer combination. It is a combination that I see very rarely. It has become a rare constellation of troops, as a lot of players simply adjusted to playing cavalry as their frontline unit, because cavalry is, it is straight up just a very strong frontline, especially for archer players. And this is why the Durendal is definitely falling behind, but it's not only because of that. It is also because of the fact that the Durendal objectively isn't that good of an artifact for infantry plus archer players. But let's just take a look at it. The base stat is probably straight up the best stat on this artifact. Damage against cavalry boost is very relevant. It became very important over the last few years, since cavalry has become one of the, or probably the most played frontline unit in the game, and just having more damage against those units is very relevant, as you are simply destroying them as fast as possible, even though the dodge triggers still make it very hard for you to land even an attack. But damage against cavalry boost is something that is rarely found in any other artifacts. You would need to play, for example, with the Apollo's Bow, which is, in my opinion, one of the probably straight up better artifacts compared to the Durendal, but we get into that later. Let's continue with the other stats. The second star, the archer attack, is attractive and definitely needed and interesting for all of us players that play archers. In addition to that, the archer attack makes the artifact interesting, in my opinion, because it is again the fact of, okay, we bring this artifact up to level 10, so we profit from the damage increased against cavalry. We have the archer attack, especially for growing castles, that can be an early interesting investment, or an interesting early investment, just to overbridge these gaps of huge power holes in your castle development. But level 10 in artifacts isn't that hard to reach. It barely costs any artifact EXP, and then you have a few percent of damage increased against cavalry, which is nice, and additional archer attack from then on. Overall, for that, the artifact is interesting, but from the third and fourth star on, it gets worse straight up. As you have on the third star, you have archer HP, which you barely care about, as you are in your frontline is the unit where you want to have the additional HP and not your backline. So the third star definitely lacks in interest for any player. The fourth star with infantry attack adds that up. You have infantry attack, and in your frontline you want to have the additional defense, you want to have the additional HP. And in addition to that, it is interesting for cavalry players to have increased attack, but there do I have to say that for infantry, it isn't the fact, in my opinion. You really feel the additional attack when it comes to cavalry players, as they are very consistent and have higher damage than your infantry in general. But the infantry attack makes it really hard for us. It is the weakest unit attack-wise in the game, which is why the fourth star isn't that attractive either. The fifth star, the additional attack boost of 9.5%, is great, as it also scales with your angels, which is very important in my opinion to have a high attack power in your angels. But until the fifth star, it is a pretty long way. When I compare that to my Gusli artifact, which is still growing, and I currently have it on the fourth star, and refining it and getting it to the fifth star is still a very long way for me. This is why I like to compare that. The Gusli, for example, every star on this artifact is attractive for a cavalry player. From the fourth star, or especially now I'm talking about the fourth star with the additional cavalry attack. But the Durendal is simply, okay, if you play that as an infantry and archer player, you're like, okay, the base stat and the second star are great. But from then on, I know that archer HP isn't that relevant. I mean, it's nice when you have that Sacred Flame of the opponent's angels or the Flame Messiah doing less damage in your backline. That's dope. Don't get me wrong on that. But in the end, it's not what you want in your backline. Of course, the more the longer living archers in your backline will by that increase the damage because more are alive than before the attack of the Sacred Flame or the Flame Missile. But you get what I'm saying. You want attack in your backline and not those defensive stats. The infantry attack is the same. If you have a very powerful frontline, of course, then it is cool to have a long-lasting infantry which also deals quite a bit of damage. But just reducing it to the base stats, we all know that infantry has the lowest attack of all units in the game. Can quickly check again when we are talking about the tier 13 attack: 172, 198, 264 and 301. So they are the weakest unit when it comes to attacks, which is why, in my opinion, the Durendal is an interesting artifact for players which play on a very small budget that really say, okay, I just want to skip these power holes while my castle is still in a development phase. I want to get it to level 10 and then profit from the second star just for a short period of time until I can start working on, for example, as I have said earlier, the Gusli artifact or the, I would have diffused it, the Apollo's Bow, for example. And these are straight up just more interesting artifacts. Apollo's Bow is anyways probably the artifact that you would build if you are an infantry and archer player. Aside from the Athena's Aegis, well, Athena's Aegis and Apollo's Bow would be probably the artifacts which I personally would build as an infantry and archer player. We could still discuss about the, the Heavenly Spear, that's also an option, but I prefer the Apollo's Bow simply because of its skill. Which is why I personally think the Durendal is a good artifact if you just want to skip a few months of a power hole while you are still a developing castle. But for a long run, this isn't worth investing into it. Bring it to level 10, profit from the additional archer tech, and that's probably it. We don't need those artifacts anymore to improve our totems, so that became irrelevant over the last few weeks as updates have changed. And from what I'm getting, yeah, you don't even need to put any artifacts into these anymore, and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is, just be mindful about the fact that the Durendal isn't an artifact for the long run. Even if you're playing on a small budget, you will exchange it at some point as it simply doesn't pay off. If you're an infantry and archer player, use it for the second star and that's probably it. And then at some point you will switch to way more beneficial artifacts for these troop compositions. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this artifact check. Let me know in the comments below which artifact you want to see next. And if you're interested in being featured in the Pimp My Castle series, reach out to me over my channel information. And then I would say, see you in the next video. Goodbye guys.